Hello, and welcome to another episode of CRT Sound System. My name is Tom, and we're here to talk about Warhammer 40k Darktide. Here, as always, with Reese. Reese, how are you?
I'm incredible excited for this one.
Yeah, looking forward to this one myself. We've got a guest along, our 40k nerds, I suppose. Ash. Ash, how are you?
Hi, I'm good.
Thanks for
Fantastic.
coming back on the pod. Really
Yeah.
excited to have you here again.
Yeah,
Of
you were
course,
last with
always
us for
excited to
the
talk about 40k. Always excited to talk about some industrial beats.
Yes.
Yeah, you were last with us for the Fury soundtrack, which I feel like is not dissimilar to this in terms of the sort of the beats and such. But yeah, a very different game. But yeah, if you want to maybe just go into just the basics of what Darktide is, and maybe more broadly about 40k and the whole universe of it, without yeah, I suppose hit us with both barrels, as Reese said earlier on.
All right, I'm gonna try and not go too insane with it, but Darktide is probably my favorite of all of the modern Skinner box games because it is the most futile in its own universe. It is a game about attempting to clear essentially dust out of a gigantic building. You are never going to get the dust. There will always be dust in some corner somewhere. So inevitably, they will have to dust again. And it just keeps going until somebody decides that it's too complicated to dust the building and they just nuke it.
Okay.
That is essentially the plot of Darktide. You are going to try and cleanse some chaos rot from this city that is about 14 kilometers tall. The average resident doesn't see the sun very often. Like it's a massive, like almost a organism of a city.
Mhm.
It is so complex and so layered on top of each other, on top of itself, excuse me, that like it's nearly impossible to check every corner to clear every room. So this process of sending in a strike team to take out this enemy force that will then recover itself and expand again as soon as the strike team leaves. It's a game about that futility. You are delaying the inevitable, and how the Imperium of Man handles these issues is once the inevitable is unable to be delayed any further, they drop a bomb on it. They will probably end up nuking Hive Tertium and destroying everything that we have worked on. But until that time, get in there. Clean up that rock.
Yeah.
You're doing something.
Interesting. Like, yeah, I only played, as I say, I was saying there, like I played about an hour and a half of it, and like I really enjoyed like the gunplay and everything, but yeah, it was definitely a struggle to sort of get your bearings in there, and like the amount of times where like just you'd have a horde start coming, and like I suppose in that regard it's a fairly standard sort of horde shooter, in that like you get to a point and then like suddenly there's just a fucking shit ton of guys, and you're just trying to stem the tide as much as possible.
Yeah.
And I guess hence the name Darktide, I suppose, is just, it's just these waves and waves of enemies. Is it like, is this a sort of a normal thing to happen in the universe, I suppose, or is this something that's considered to be way out of sort of what would normally be happening in this universe?
I feel. Sorry. Go ahead.
I would say it's not normal, but it's something that there are protocols for.
Yeah.
So the specific enemy that we're fighting in Darktide is a chaos cult that worships Nurgle, the god of entropy and decay and disease and
Okay.
rot. So the issue with chaos is that the average Imperium citizen doesn't know a single thing about it, and the discovery of it usually melts and warps their minds to the point where they're either driven mad and just die from the experience, or they end up falling to chaos as they realize that there is no hope. So it becomes incredibly hard to cleanse the chaos out of any one area without major military action. And Darktide is the beginnings of military action. It is just sending out strike teams to try and keep the chaos forces contained into some sections of Hive Tertium, so that the entire Hive doesn't have to be purged yet.
Okay.
It is more typical than not on Hive worlds. Because Hive cities are these huge, again, 14 kilometers at the top of the tallest spire, cities. There's always some nonsense going on, whether it's a gang that starts up and attempts to challenge the Imperium's government in that region, whether it's a chaos cult that forms. Sometimes there's gene stealers from the Tyranid race, which they're very good at infiltrating human settlements. Even if the planet might have had an orc infestation a while ago, orcs in the 40k universe are more of a fungus than a living animal. So
Relatable.
if some orc spores get into one corner of the hive, you could have a decades-long orc infestation. Like it's nearly impossible to keep everything out of these gigantic megaplexes. So megatropolises. So this is kind of normal.
Okay.
It's also generally done with smaller strike teams to try and keep things quiet. You don't want the rest of the hive to know that something's wrong. If you send in the Space Marines, they'll know.
Yeah.
So just
So
small
that's why
dropships coming
when
in
you
and
start
out.
off, you're just like prisoners or whatever, and you're just sort of sort of like a Suicide Squad type situation, I suppose.
Yeah.
Where you're incredibly expendable, but I suppose the rewards for you as a character are quite high then if you manage to get through it.
I'd like to
I don't know
add.
how high the rewards are. Sorry, go.
Well,
Yeah,
I don't know, like you get your loot or whatever. I don't know.
you get to live.
Yeah.
You get to live if you kill enough.
Yeah, fair enough.
Life for the average citizen in 40k is really interesting. I know it's a different video game, but Reese and I have been chatting back and forth about Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader by Owlcat Games. And there's one particular line in that game that really crystallizes a lot of what the average citizen's life is like on 40k. There's this moment where you're chatting as the rogue trader, this incredibly rich and powerful individual, the captain of your very own ship, the ruler of a trade empire, and you're talking to one of the guys who guards your personal bath. And it turns out that this is all his family has done for generations. They are very honored to guard the bath of the rogue trader. They raise their sons and daughters for the purpose of guarding the bath of the rogue trader. So,
and they're like legitimately like really grateful. They're like, this station, this is so much better than what 99% of people get to do. Thank you for letting me, bottle up your bathwater. To sell on the market.
In a world where you never see the sun, and like you probably never move more than like 1 or 2 kilometers from where you were born. That's probably something to be aspired to.
A little bit of insight that Rogue Trader gave me into the Darktide vibe is after you go through the prologue and you get control of your ship after a crazy beginning of stuff. They're just like 30% of the ship is still on fire. There's like cultists everywhere. The ship's just too big to ever really deal with everything. And I feel like that's a good insight into the world of Warhammer 40k. Above all the other lore, it's a world where the Imperium of Man is operating on such a large scale.
Yeah.
It's impossible to really any one person to really grasp it. And so like in Darktide, this is one Hive world of countless, and they're just trying to hang on because there's valuable ore, or I forget exactly what the Empire gets out of this Hive world. Um, but I think it's a good setting for this genre of game where it's kind of an evolution of the Left 4 Dead co-op we've seen throughout the past couple of decades, that
Yeah.
Payday 2 was the master of for a while, and now Fat Shark is kind of commandeered as the best one with Darktide, and previously Vermintide, I think, is the one
Yeah.
people were super familiar with. And just, I think it works really well to have this for a horde shooter, and the fact that you're in this kind of like co-op strike team, and all of the like banter between your four guys is really good at giving you like peeks into what the Warhammer world is like without, going too bird's eye view.
Mm.
And to get to the subject of it, the Jesper Kids soundtrack is pitch perfect, and heightening this whole experience, which can be, like you said, a lot. When I first started playing it, I really was not absorbing or able to parse what was happening. Almost to the point where I was like struggling to even like find my way around or recognize these are hatches where a lot of dudes are going to come out of, just because it
Mm.
was so complicated. But Jesper Kid anchors it, and really kind of like it makes you feel what kind of world this is, where it's bleak and horrible, but there's something but we're still having fun with it. That's the appeal.
Yeah. No, we talked a bit over the intro as well, of just like that sort of the the techno industrial elements of it, sort of fused and with the choral vocals to sort of give it that weird sort of like the human and the industrial sort of contrasting, but also coming together. And yeah, that in a world, I suppose, like these cities, are these designed just to sort of produce for the sake of production, from what I understand it.
Yeah.
Which is sort of like a really interesting uh, expansion or extrapolation of our current world, I suppose.
Yeah, 40K is
Possibly
a
more than they ever intended when they created the world of Warhammer,
no.
yeah, Warhammer. Yeah.
Nah, they started writing this stuff under I believe Theresa May's administration.
Oh, really? Wow. Okay.
So yeah, they specifically were trying to dial fascism and authoritarianism up to a 10, up to its most absurd point. The like one of the reasons why I said this is my favorite of the Skinner Box games is because diegetically the setting works so well for the gameplay. Every time a character dies or is captured on your team, when a player leaves the lobby or something, and just another random has to load in, that's how it works. If you die, it's oh no, big deal, on to the next one. Like,
Yeah.
High Command is just replacing you, your human chum, your cannon fodder. It is it's so perfect.
And how, as far as like the setting, how is that different from Vermintide? I'm not really super familiar with Vermintide.
So Vermintide is Warhammer Fantasy, which
Oh,
is
it's the okay, right? I didn't realize. Okay.
technically they're both canon within each other's universes.
Mm.
But Warhammer Fantasy is a lot less of a pointed critique
Yeah.
than 40K is.
Yeah.
It one of the tracks that I specifically requested to have in the list for today has a beautiful juxtaposition between this wonderful gothic chorus and all of these dirty, nasty electronic sounds, and it evokes a sense of like a drummer boy continuing to play while the regiment is getting slaughtered around him. The music is definitely doing something. It's for religious purposes. We swear the God Emperor is watching. Please don't stop singing. It like your job while blood and chaos out is raining down outside is to hope that your singing inspires one man from across the universe to like pay attention to you in your moment of need. It's so bleak and at the same time so beautiful in that sense.
Yeah, it's that is interesting actually. Now that you mention it, just the because Reese mentioned it as well. It's just like the scale of this, of the world. Like one of the things that you sent me a couple of lore videos to watch, and I struggled to sort of keep up with all the actual sort of all the names and different nouns and verbs to keep up with. But one thing that really struck me through it was just the description of like the vastness of this empire and how like some worlds were so far away from things that like they literally went millennia to the point where they'd forgotten they were part of the Imperium, until like somebody showed up to like put them back in line essentially, which I find is a really fascinating just sort of like just that almost infinite scale that you can work within, but then sort of taking that and being like, okay, we're going to focus in on this one planet, and even within the planet, like the sense of scale, as you say, is like a 14 kilometer high city, like, and possibly sizes of entire continents in terms of like how far they stretch out. I think the one of the videos you mentioned, or you sent me, was like mentioned that this city is like 90 billion people, which is like again like at a scale of like that you cannot possibly imagine, and that is a single city in this entire universe. It's like, yeah, it's really interesting to think about how much that sort of gives you to work with as far as just things to do and sort of stories to tell.
There's a great interaction between the two. I believe it's one of the psychers and somebody else, but the psycher's like, even if these are like worthless dregs, you should treat them a little better so they don't rebel. And then it's like the dog class or the veteran like just made a noise like, yeah. Just like that's the attitude. Just like, there's a lot of people. What are we gonna do about it?
Yeah, and also there's been because God, so with 40,000 years of history, Warhammer 40K, there have been a few different eras of the Imperium. Like you were saying, there was the Golden Age of the Imperium, there was a collapse, then there was the Great Crusade to reunite all of those far-reaching worlds, and the heresy that came later. And when Darktide is set is in that 41st millennium, where the Empire has grown and shrunk and had a schism that it's tried to recover from. And now it's at this point where it's just trying to hang on. It's led by the polite name would be the Corpse Emperor. No, it's led by a dead man strapped to a throne, fed by 1,000 psychoactive souls per day. Like the only thing keeping this empire together is like a force that scours its entire expanse for people to bring to the emperor's throne to eat. It is like at this point where things are beyond the point where there is any glory left, and all of the like the high Gothic choruses and the beautiful architecture and all of that is just, it's gold paint on a turd. And I love that so much because you can get lost in all of that grandiosity. It's sometimes so incredible to be, walking through these massive cathedrals, and then you realize that there's a bunch of drooling mutants and pus-filled Nurgle cultists on the other side. And ugh.
Fair enough. All right, I think we'll jump into the first block of tracks anyway. So again, all the music by the in the game is done by Jesper. We'll probably talk a little bit more about him in the next block. So first track I have is the Uprising on Hive Tertium. Then I have Escaping the Prison Ship. Then Late Night Entertainment, Forge Manufactorum, and Transmission Commences.
I really like that last track when it shows up in game. Transmission commences.
Yeah, you
that
mentioned
that
earlier,
little harmonious like it's like it always shows up right when you have to use. There's like a scanner in the game, and you have to fight dudes off while you have to scan like 3 to 5
yeah, I
different
remember doing
things.
that, yeah.
But it really does feel like you're briefly touching. You're briefly a part of the Omni Messiah, and then it sort of like slowly kind of degrades or finishes. But that opening beautiful harmonious moment feels like like Warhammer's 40K's like modem connection noise almost. That's how I view it anyways.
Yeah, I can hear that, yeah. Yeah, a lot of those tunes, yeah, they were a lot less. Sort of started us off with the more sort of ambient stuff before we get into the real techno industrial stuff later on. But yeah, like there's a because I guess like a lot of these games, you have these moments of quiet and these moments of intense sort of panic as you try and fucking deal with a bunch of dudes running at you from 6 different directions at once while you're shouting at your friends. Which is obviously the joy of it. But yeah, it's really really good. So I suppose to talk about Jesper Cade, I wasn't super familiar with him before this. Like he was a name that I was aware of, but I hadn't really listened to much of his soundtracks.
I remember when I brought this up, you made a very dismissive noise. You're like, I don't know about this Jesper Cade.
Yeah. Well, I guess like I associate him with a lot of Ubisoft games, which in my mind was just like slop. And I maybe I should have given him some more credit because yeah, definitely this stuff is really really good. And like looking back at his credits, like there's definitely some other soundtracks that I have enjoyed from him before, like MDK2, which I didn't realize was him. And I had listened to stuff like the Hitman games and stuff before as well. But like he's gone back to like the Commodore 64 days. So like he's been around for quite a while, like, so I mean, good on him, frankly, for sticking to it. And again, wasn't familiar with his game as far as like techno industrial shit goes, and I'm happy to be wrong in that regard.
Yeah, he started out in the demo scene like very young. He was like, I don't know, like 13, 14. And then
Yeah.
like before, he turned 18, I think him and a bunch of his Danish friends had started like a game company, and he would compose the music and they would release the games. And a lot of those people that he worked with went on to publish IO Interactive while he
Okay.
stayed, which is why there's the Hitman connection with him. So yeah, he's just one of these, like, his whole life is music. Everything he, like, whenever he talks about composing songs, he's got there's just like this intrinsic knowledge he can't even like share with the interviewer. He's like, he's like, just sit with a song and I push my buttons and then come up with it. He's a little bit more articulate than that, but it's very much just
Yeah.
like so much takes place inside. It's fascinating.
I remember, actually, not just sort of a random thought that I had. Somebody, a friend of mine, was recently telling me about this interview that he was listening to with Fortet, and where he talked about his process for making music, and it was so clear from the way he talked about it that it was such a natural thing to him, that like stuff that to us, to normal humans, just seems like so complex and so sort of unintuitive. It was just like completely natural to some people, and like, yeah, it does sound like, from what you were saying there, that it's not dissimilar for him, where it's just like this stuff is so ingrained in him, that it is hard for him to sort of to think of it being difficult for somebody else.
Yeah.
Which I find is an interesting thing for people who are sort of on that level.
Yeah, and he's somebody who plays the game, and really approaches it. He's got a very direct sort of style, where like with Darktide in interviews, he was saying he didn't want to, no guitars. He didn't want it to sound too orchestral at any point. He wanted to achieve that vibe with synth and chorals and percussion, and and I think that he definitely pulls it off. But he also says he always wants to surprise you in Darktide, where it's like, yeah, this is going to be kind of like a blood pumping part, but it's never like, oh, here's the battle music. It's we've just turned up the tempo and the volume. It always feels like very different in the moment, and it's like the application of the music is really interesting and exciting.
Yeah. We'll definitely hear it in later tracks for sure, but like there's a lot of that going on, where like in the midst of the sort of the industrial clanging and disharmony and stuff like that, they just have these little moments of beauty, and just like, nice little harmonious elements, or like, as say, like a choral comes in, or like a violin or something like that comes through, that sort of cuts through the pulsing techno beats. And I do love the pulsing techno beats, but it's nice to get those sort of moments of contrast, that really sort of, it really cuts through it, I suppose. Yeah. But
Yeah,
like,
you have to, through the music, show that separation between the higher elements of the Imperium and the lower elements, your high Gothic and your low Gothic. So Jesper Kid has created this soundscape that eliminates those sounds that can be found somewhere in the middle, that could be maybe a little dirty or a little cleaner. Your guitar, like your string instruments that are a little bit more common these days. So you have your violins and your chorus at the top, and your nasty synths and industrial beats at the bottom, and it's a beautiful bit of instrumentation.
Yeah, it's really nice. Excuse me. Yeah, no, is the like the soundtracks for Vermintide, are they similar to this, or is he sort of more organic, given that it's in the fantasy universe?
I gotta be honest with you. I feel like this is um a massive step up from the
Okay.
Vermintide soundtrack. I don't have anything against the Vermintide music, but I just don't find it nearly as compelling. And I didn't even realize it was Jesper Kid until we got to Darktide. I feel like I'd have to go back and listen to some Vermintide, but I feel like Vermintide is a bit it's a bit more playing to type. Is like you know exactly what's coming when the music's playing. It doesn't have this sort of like very innovative against the grain aspects to it because it's a bit more, you know, you're it's a bit more hard scrabble in Vermintide. Vermintide is you are like the last four people alive, or last, you know, among the last people alive before the rats absolutely just destroy everything on Earth. And so it's a bit more grim. It's a bit more rooted than that. It does, and there's, you know, I love Vermintide, but there's, I think, a little less to express in it. And I don't know. It's I do think kind of I think he's a great artist, but I do think Darktide is a very special soundtrack from him. I think it might be his best. I haven't listened to all of them, but it was enough to compel me to be like, "Hey, Ashley, let's freak out about Darktide on a podcast."
Yeah.
I'm telling y'all, it's the 40K themes. The difference between the Warhammer Fantasy universe and the Warhammer 40K universe. Warhammer Fantasy is just not quite as fleshed out. It doesn't have as much to say. The various fantasy themes are kind of stock and standard, but 40K is this really rich, layered universe with so much going on and so much that can be expressed through various artistic elements that, like, I think it's just a more fun setting to play around in.
Yeah. No, it is
Absolutely.
such a fascinating setting. Like, I've never fully been able to get into the sort of the tabletop start part of it, but like, I even as far back as like playing I remember playing Dawn of War, back with my friends in college, like, and not really being familiar with it, but like loving like just stuff like the orcs, like the way like the whole thing of like orcs magic working through belief,
Yeah.
and like how if they paint something red, is it like red stuff is faster or something like that? I forget
The
what
red
it is.
ones go faster.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Like stuff like that is just so fascinating, and it's also funny because like there's a silliness to this, like it you couldn't have this type of a universe and take it seriously, and I know there's a bunch of people who take it fully seriously, but they're not people who are themselves to be taken seriously.
Well, yeah.
Absolutely true.
To take it too seriously is to become parody yourself. Like
Yeah.
and I think that's what kind of helped me settle into like the lore and everything else. It's like, I don't need this. They're not really expecting me to know all of the lore. It's just there for you to, you know, to dig through and enjoy being in the world.
Yeah.
But you know, you can take as much or as little as you like, and still, I think the vibe is there.
Yeah. No, there is an undeniable vibe to 40K that yeah, it's sort of hard to overlook.
Yeah, it's one of the sci-fi universes that is born as a setting itself more than a setting for a story. It very similar to, say, Mass Effect. It was a lot more interesting to play around within the universe of Mass Effect and the political
Yeah.
world that BioWare created than it was to actually play through Commander Shepard's story.
Yeah.
It 40K is this wonderful universe that contains multitudes, and you can tell so many different kinds of stories within it. And those stories are where it's at its best. And I think where it's at its worst is when people try to tie those stories into a coherent narrative to turn it into a thing where you have this sense of which lore is correct versus a bunch of stories being told around a fire lit in a barrel in the middle of some hab in the middle of some void ship in the middle of, you know, some galaxy. Like these are all infinitesimally, like, I don't know, they're things that could be true, they could not be true.
Yeah.
They're fun to talk about, but the weight of actual lore and at this point in time this character did this, and at this point in time this character did that is less important.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know if we mentioned it, was it during one of the breaks, but like that whole thing of how like so much of the of like the history of this universe is lost. And like, so it sort of builds that into the lore itself of like, a lot of this is unknowable, a lot of it can never be knowable because we just don't have the records. And like it's designed to just be like a lot of it can be just speculative, and you know, you're not locked into sort of, if you want to write a story in this universe, it's not like you're going to have to check out Wikipedia to fucking figure out exactly what dates you can set things in so that nerds on the internet don't get mad at you.
Yeah, if you try to become the true Warhammer lore understander, you just turn into a crazy library guy. You live in the library, you read books, that's all you do. You talk about this book, that book, and the other book, and sometimes you forget what you read in the books, you have to read the book again. It becomes a never-ending cycle versus the more vibes-based interpretations.
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned when I was listening to and watching those videos you sent me, it was like a lot. The stuff that really stood out to me was just like the broader universe stuff, like the talking about like which family took over the stewardship of a planet or whatever. I was fully tuned out for that shit. But like, yeah, the stuff talking about like the scale of the universe and just sort of the use of just like these hive cities as metaphors for capitalism, essentially, was much more interesting to me, and that was the stuff that I really locked in on.
Yeah.
Right. I think we're going to jump into the next block of tracks. So a little bit more stuff going on with these ones, more of your techno-industrial shit. So we have Imperial Advance, Immortal Imperium, Dropship to Hive Tertium, the Transit Horde, and Data Interference. one thing I sort of really was impressed with when listening through this as well is just like how many of these are really short tracks. Like he really is happy to just get in and out and just be like, here are the 3 or 4 musical ideas that I want to get across, and sort of these 3 or 4 thematic ideas. And like, yeah, that's really good. Like the last track we were talking about, just the data one, is just like, it does sound like a modem, like sounds like you're connecting data. Like there's sort of a binary aspect to it that's really, really interesting. And again, like on top of that, you have your chorals and your organs and everything like that. But it's just like the beats are, yeah, they're really sort of leaning into to various aspects of the universe in really interesting ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the tracks, it's a little weirder listening to the soundtrack because a lot of these tracks flow into each other kind of very easily, and sort of like the transmission commences track in the last in the block before this. It took me a while to find it because I didn't realize it was like so much of it was the quiet part. So much usually when you're doing that, it I think transitions into something like data transmissions or data interference rather. Yeah, and we talked a lot about it during the break, but like so much of this music evokes a feeling of being you're in a world where there is so much more than you. You know, like Ash was talking about the what do they call the Adeptus Mechanicus? Is that the name of like the order of
Yeah.
like data people?
Yeah.
And the Omnissiah, and how they have this own series of bespoke tech cults that all can have a different interpretation of what it means to worship the Omnissiah. And it's very interesting to me the way that is kind of interpreted and the dogma, and how weird it is when somebody kind of isn't a part of that larger thing. I would say in the game, in Darktide at least, psychers are kind of represented as more of these individual figures because they're such outcasts, and the psychers have can create mental fire, that sort of thing. They communicate across the depths. They help them go into warp. That sort of thing, in my understanding. And like when they talk in the game, they are absolute fucking insane narcissists, or they're just like broken people, like just being driven forward by like a power that they don't understand, and kind of are just waiting to die, which is a common state of being in the Warhammer universe. But I do kind of love it. It's a very effective presentation of just like these individual aspects are so muted in these characters, but their characters all the same, and so put them in a big ensemble, and it's quite interesting.
Yeah. I do find it interesting. You mentioned sort of like the sort of the lack of individuality in this universe is interesting, and especially when you compare it to like, you think of like the Space Marines or the Inquisitors or whatever, the sort of the flagship characters as being, this one thing, but like they're just sort of, they could be anyone. They don't really have any identity of their own. They're just part of a horde. And like, we talked a bit during the break of how like a lot of this music sort of sounds like you could be just part of an army of thousands just marching in complete lockstep. And I find that like using the sort of the techno industrial beats as a thematic element in that is really, really interesting, especially like because like that was sort of one of the things that started off like when people began to make industrial music. A lot of it was sort of very focused on that as well, and like you have like bands like KMFDM who really like to sort of play around with like fascist imagery and stuff like that in their aesthetic, and even like stuff like the like your digital hardcore like bands and stuff like that, where they were sort of coming from a punk aesthetic as well, and sort of trying to reconcile the sort of the individual with the group. And yeah, it's just sort of a very interesting use of that that cultural artifact of the 80s and 90s to get that across.
So Ashley, I'm curious, what was your intro? Where did you dip into Warhammer 40K? Were you a model painting sicko, or where did it come from?
Uh, I actually have not painted a miniature or built one. I was introduced to Warhammer 40K back when I was in college by my roommate and some friends. We played the tabletop RPG Rogue Trader, um, which was an interesting experience. It uh, I I think that 40K is best experienced through the eyes of an experienced storyteller as opposed to your buddy from the next hallway who read some books one time. Um, it's incredibly complicated. There are a lot of different themes to play on or play against, and all of these things going on that it I actually was pushed away from the game and the setting for years, but I came back to it more recently. I had heard about Warhammer 40K Mechanicus, an XCOM like tactical game about a bunch of Mechanicus members diving into an ancient alien ruin and fighting off the Necrons that sleep within it, and it got me paying attention again. And also, the lore is incredibly interesting, both on a macro level and a micro level. I love the stories about that one named guy doing that one important thing, but also the larger narrative of like the vibes, the way that things work in the Imperium. If someone did this, then this would happen. These kind of like looks into various people's lives within the Imperium, but not specific people. The kind of like, well, this person's life could be like this kind of life could be like that, and seeing this distorted world, it's beautiful.
I think, in at least in my experience, it's very easy to bounce off Warhammer 40K once or twice before you properly start to appreciate it. Because I played Mechanicus, and that was my first time really wrestling with 40K as a concept beyond just like the Space Marines, they're Marines in space, which was kind of my reaction until that point. And Mechanicus was difficult. I'm gonna start playing it again now that I like 40K. But for a while, I was like, I do not know what to make of all of these robot people, and the Necrons. It was I didn't dislike it. I didn't think it was bad. It was just a lot all at once. And I think that, like, thinking back on Mechanicus now, I feel like it's probably because it was being pretty true to the setting, and it was being weird about those freaks who have internet in 40K.
Yeah, it's definitely weird the way the franchise advertises itself to people. You see the Space Marines out front; they are the money makers. But also they're kind of the least interesting part of the universe at its current point in time. The Space Marine stories are really interesting during the Great Crusade, during the heresy that followed. But in M41, the where Darktide is set and where most of the 40K games that you're going to be playing are set, um, they get deployed here and there to fight a war that ends, and there's not really any great change to the universe, and it just like it's a lot of these important characters who did great things kind of bouncing off each other in the current era. They're not doing great things right now. Um, so once you hit that wall and are like, oh, the Space Marine lore is just not super interesting at the moment, it can take a little bit before you work into the rest of the universe and like get into the lives of the average Imperial citizen or your various alien races.
Yeah, now I kind of appreciate Space Marines more as just they're less, I think, characters that are supposed to be the heroes of the tale or whatever, but more just like if Space Marines show up is just like something insane is about to go down. It's just like they're warriors on a scale that we cannot understand as human beings who are at max 7 feet tall. Um, it's they're giant and sort of like the Darktide makes you appreciate this by having the Ogren, which seem like kind of genetically modified, kind of like servile race who's just like very stupid and kind of very loyal and happy and is just like it's great being giant and killing things. Sometimes I have to push buttons. I don't like that, but we all have tough times. And that's kind of what I like about the Space Marines now is that I very rarely encounter them in the Warhammer stuff I am, and when they are mentioned, it's just like oh shit, that would be real bad if we had these absolute death monsters arriving on the scene, or we have to have the death monsters because the Tyranids are here or something.
Yeah, they're frequently referred to as the Emperor's Angels. And Be Not Afraid is the right vibe. If they're showing up somewhere, things are probably not good, or they are about to become very not good. And they're like much like the powers of chaos or the God Emperor himself. They're things that the average Imperial citizen has maybe seen a picture of. Whether that picture was digitally created or hand drawn is another story. They've heard stories about them. Maybe, they took a class at one point to learn something about Imperial history and they heard a story. But like these are fictional beings to the average Imperial citizen. When a Space Marine shows up, it is like seeing one of God's angels upon the earth. It is an earth-shattering thing. The only correct thing to do is bow and do whatever he tells you or she.
Yeah, the Space Marines are they're such a funny like they've become this this totem of the series. But yeah, as you say, it is interesting that like to the average person in the universe that they don't exist, essentially, that they're and I suppose it's similar with the Inquisitors as well. As like if an Inquisitor has to show up, things possibly have gone so far down the shitter that it's not possible to save it anymore. Which is
The Inquisition is a more present force in the average life of an Imperial citizen than something like the Space Marines are.
Interesting.
The Imperium has invested a lot in keeping its citizenry in line. So while you might not have an Inquisitor, you would have, say, someone from the Lex Imperialis, someone from like a military police corps, someone from the local government who can contact an Inquisitor and has powers bestowed upon them to enact judgment upon the average citizen. So like these people experience the actual hardships in their everyday life. They see what happens when you do not adhere to the Imperial tenets, but they only hear about the benefits of those Imperial tenets. They've only heard of the Space Marines. They've probably never in their lives witnessed or felt the presence of the God Emperor. For the average citizen, it is much like praying to a real life God who may or may not exist depending on your belief. Whereas if you're someone who is maybe a little higher up the chain of Imperial status, you understand that no, the God Emperor is a guy. He does exist. He is fueled by 1,000 Psyker souls a day. And if you do pray hard enough, he can come and protect you in your moment of need. Keep praying.
Okay.
Also, it's from at least my understanding of Rogue Trader, which I do think is, if you're interested in Warhammer 40k stuff, if you've got the Sicko bug, that's a good one to play. Even though I'm still very early on, is it has a lot of very interesting interpretations of the lore. But one aspect of it, one character you meet is basically the tax collector. And it seems like a very real part of the citizenry's lives is making sure you have the Emperor's tithe. Otherwise, that's when he'll take notice, ask why you're not getting the tithe. Is it chaos? Maybe the Inquisition's going to get involved. They're not specifically tax collectors, is my understanding, but those sort of arms of the organization are a lot more likely to touch your life. Confirmed in IASH.
Yes, absolutely true. Also, extreme cosign on 40k Rogue Trader. If you're into the action game side of things, Darktide is more your jam. But if you enjoy a good visual novel, emphasis on the novel, 40k Rogue Trader is a fantastic experience. It's a great way to dive into the universe. What a game! What an experience!
Interesting.
Great way to blow 150 hours and then want to do it again.
Yeah,
I'll have
absolutely.
to take a look at that. Yeah. All right. So I think we'll jump into the next block of tracks.
Yep.
So I have Nightsider, Warp Traveler, Reality Slipping, Embrace of the Chaos Cult, and Admonition. I need to learn more about the warp because from when you were talking about it during the break there, I just sort of assumed the warp was just like I guess like standard warp in sci-fi, but it is actually a separate reality from what I
Yeah.
understand from what you were saying. So that's where the chaos is coming from. Is that my understanding?
So, God, the warp is it's not quite a mirror universe, but it
Hmm.
is its own distinct plane that is separate but connected to the real world. It's commonly referred to as the Materium and the Immaterium. Um,
Okay.
the goings on in the warp are it's 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 vibes based. Things are maybe happening, they're not happening. Time is a little loopy. Um,
Okay.
so like for example, warp travel. Ships travel through the warp in order to
Okay.
get
So they do
to
actually do travel there. Okay.
yeah,
Interesting.
so how
Interesting.
that works is they are literally slipping into a dimension filled with demons and unknowable terrors and all kinds of things that are held back from the ship by void shields and clever navigation. Um, and when that ship exits the warp, they are only hoping that they have reached the place they want to reach at the time they wanted to reach it. Sometimes a force will be deployed and it will show up 6 months after it was supposed to. Sometimes it will show up 6 months before it was supposed to, giving the lovely residents of whatever planet a big jump scare. Why are the Space Marines here? Oh God. Uh, it so like mechanically how it functions for the average citizen is kind of this unknowable like thing that you just have to deal with, a sea filled with storms and various quirks that you'll get through it. If you know more about what's going on in the warp, it is actually entirely filled with demons that are fueled by the actions and feelings of creatures within the material realm. The various chaos gods feed off of the material race's actions, their wars, their desires, their various schemes. All of that fuels chaos, and every single species in the galaxy is at risk in their own way of falling to chaos. The biggest example being the Eldar, the 40k equivalent of elves. There are a contingent of chaos worshipping Eldar who have given themselves over to Slanesh. There are also Eldar who would cut your head off if you even suggested that they were possibly in line with chaos. The race is divided and dealing with its own problems, much like humanity is. And the way that psychic powers generally work on kind of like a micro level, your individual psyker, they're staring into the void and hoping that the void doesn't stare too far back into them. Um, in order to summon unnatural lightning to strike out at your enemies, you do have to look into the immaterial world and pull some of that energy back with you. And in that process, you're hoping not to pull a demon through. And also, because you have that ability to create that connection between the material and the materium, you have to make sure to maintain it and keep it closed when you're, not trying to use it, because something could slip through. You could be sleeping one night, get a little too drunk, and start to listen to the voices in the back of your head, and then all of a sudden, your entire city is being consumed by chaos. Yeah, psychers are, psychers specifically are kind of an interesting thing within the 40k universe. Anyone can manifest as a psyker. Any individual human within the Imperium can manifest as a psyker. The Imperial law states that you should go and present yourself to the ecclesiarchy, the church, and let them do with you what they will. For the average psyker, you will be sent off to be trained and ideally deployed within the military or used for some purpose before you probably go insane from staring into the void a little too long one time and die. For the unlucky psyker, you get shipped off to glorious Terra to partake in the wonderful ritual of being eaten by the Emperor's chair at a rate of 1,000 psychers per day.
That's who's being fed to him? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
So the average psyker has to make a choice between going along with whatever the Imperium demands of them, be it their death or their service, or hiding their psychic powers and being a potential chaos bomb at any given point in time. It like any given person could just, be a psyker, and while they're sleeping one night trying to hide their psychic powers from their friends and family and the various Imperial guards walking around, they could listen to a voice, and it's a little crazy.
Yeah, and it does seem to me like it's sort of the evil backwash of the Imperium's war machine. I mean, I guess it's not just the Imperium of Man who is dealing with the warp, but it seems like so much of the problems they create are because they were trying to use warp travel and something happened. And now there's a problem that's much worse. And they might, everybody might be better off if they could just find a way to sit on their hands and just sort of like live within the means of the systems they're in. But of course, the Emperor is hungry and has like a rock solid mandate to kind of expand and control and consume, so that the all the warp creatures are just part of the what you pay, part of the cost. I do like also learning that the psychers are kind of like employed, they're kind of like chained to certain parts of the ship and just sort of like large numbers as part of just to do long distance communication. And it sounds like it fucking sucks. They're just like, your whole life is you're just kind of like connected with all the other psychers on the ship and just trying to like vibe out what's being told to you from Earth, 200,000 light years away or something. And bad things can happen when your mind is open like that for so long, even if you're not in the warp.
Yeah,
that's really interesting. Like is faster than light travel something that's not super common?
So
it's just going to be like your space marines and your like people higher up that will. It's
Event Horizon rules.
Okay.
I would say Event Horizon takes place in the 40K universe, where it's like you're kind of punching your way through reality. At least that's my understanding.
Well, you need a navigator. That's kind of your cutoff. Okay. Technologically, your average pirate gang could probably get their hands on a void ship if they tried hard enough. They could fight their way on and take control and manage to capture a ship. The issue is a navigator. In order to chart a course through the warp, essentially, like in more reality terms, or more realistic terms, like in order to sail through a hurricane, essentially with a wooden ship, you're going to need the best navigator that you can get. And the navigators are a heavily controlled resource within the Imperium. They come from extremely noble houses. They are very, very, very important, and they understand that about themselves. Frequently, depending on which house a navigator is from, they might be flanked with space marines. Navigators are so connected to the warp that they've undergone physical mutations a lot of times. to make them seem almost inhuman. But yeah, so if you're able to get your hands on a navigator, you might be able to cross the warp and exit a star system. So, like, you could say live your entire life and have your entire criminal empire, whatever, within the Sol system. So Earth and your various outer planets, and never be able to make it to the Greater Imperium because you don't have a navigator. Yeah,
Yeah, and it sucks so bad to be a navigator, even if you are part of this like noble line. That
yeah,
it's the sort of thing where you can't just like push somebody into it or take one hostage and have that really work out long term. It's just too crazy, man.
And I
I
suppose,
mean,
as you
you
mentioned, it's not
can.
accurate. Like, even given that, like you were saying, it's like if there's a possible 6-month window in either direction, where you could land, like that's given everything else about them, like it's probably not worth it for a lot of people to try.
Yeah,
Oh,
the training to become a navigator is intense, and also, like Reese was saying, you technically can, if you capture a void ship with a navigator, subjugate that navigator and get them to do what you want them to do. But like, it's a risk. You are every time you make a warp jump, you are punching into a world filled with demons and powers beyond human comprehension. And if that navigator really doesn't like you, they will do the equivalent of steering their car off the road and into a tree. You will have a really bad time. So, like, travel between systems is incredibly limited. Only the most powerful groups are able to do it, be they within the Imperium or part of the various human factions or an alien race. Some of the alien races have figured out how to travel between systems without using the warp, but humanity forgot. It's been a little long
yeah.
time, few 100,000 years. We don't know how to do things anymore. So we have the Emperor, who, for the cost of 1,000 Psyker souls a day, is preserving this map of the Imperium, a set of generally safe routes. That are protected through, I believe it's the Eye of Terra is the name of the
Mm.
Emperor's warp manifestation. Um, it yeah, so like warp travel is a thing that it can go wrong at any given time, but the possibility that it does is kind of up to whether the narrator needs it to.
Okay.
Um, it
Yeah,
it
yeah.
For most stories, a ship full of people flies out from one planet and arrives at another with no issues, but or no issues that caused any great delays on a macro scale. There might have been a small demon outbreak in one of the artillery batteries, but like, it was taken care of.
It
Um,
it it seems like even in a successful like no incidents warp jump, there's a high likelihood that somebody, some grunt now just has a visitor with them, just like a demon haunting them or something like that.
oh yeah.
It going wrong doesn't necessarily have to be like a big thing. Sometimes it's just like one person will be possessed by like a minor demon and will just hang out with you, which is kind of the only direct manifestation you see of it in Darktide. Like the warp isn't since you're not on a ship, you don't really uh have it talked about, except the psychers will talk around it a little bit, and there's one psyker that is specifically talking to somebody all the time, and at certain points, like when that character, because I think you can choose from a couple of different like character profiles that will control what their barks are during the game. And one of them is just like, I am in control, not you. And is like clearly like freaking out about it. And that has to be like a warp demon. Or maybe he's just crazy, but probably a warp demon.
Oh, it's probably a warp demon.
Yeah.
Yeah, a successful flight in the 40K universe is, only a few members of staff were traumatized. We have made it from New York, JFK to Heathrow Airport. Only one flight attendant has witnessed the horrors. Everything is fine.
Which is why that guy loves being in charge of the bath. It's like so much easier to deal with than murder and the warp demons. It's just stinky water. Easy
Nothing ever goes wrong at the bath. It'll be fine.
Fantastic. All right, we're going to the last block of tracks. So, most of these are actually ones that you requested, Ash. So, I have Unrest and Throneside, Offworld Auspex, Forge Chaos Detected, and then last track, which is one of my personal favorites, is Disposal Unit bracket Imperium Mix.
I think maybe if you wanted to do like a 40K roundup at some point, because there's like a number of smaller games, a number of games where the music is less like forward as a part of the experience, say like Rogue Trader.
Yeah.
I'd be really interested to dive into the music of like Bolt Gun, the boomer shooter 40K
Yeah.
game.
Yeah,
Yeah, no,
100%.
absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely something we could think about. Yeah, it is interesting. I was just sort of looking at like all the different stuff and like like I remember playing, as I said, the Dawn of War games, and I played what's it called, the PS2 shooter. Fuck, what's it called? I can't remember the name of it now off the top of my head. Fire something.
Fire
Yeah,
Warrior. Oh my
yeah.
God.
It
One
was
of
dog
the
shit, but
most unique 40K games out there. What do you mean is dog shit? This is an incredibly unique game. Good. I don't know
I
about that, but
remember, yeah, I remember disliking it as a game, but yeah,
yeah,
but like it's fascinating to me, just like as a series. Like there's so many entry points. Like we you talked earlier about how you don't really do the painting part of it, or like you could get like really into the books if you really wanted to get just into the books. You could get just into the games. Like it's interesting that there's so many entry points for 40K. And again, like all of it sort of works off of the same lore. There's no sense that like this is all a different thing. Yeah, it's really cool. That there's so much depending on what you want to get out of 40K. It depends on what you put into it, I suppose, or what you bring to it.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, Fire Warrior is an entirely different end of the universe than Darktide is. It's incredible that they're both contained within the same setting. Fire Warrior, really quick, you're playing as a Tau soldier, a soldier from an alien race, fighting in a frontline battle. It's incredibly different than something like Darktide, but wonderful that they are both still 40K.
Yeah.
I was talking with, I believe, our friend Aiden about once Star Trek, no, sorry, not Star Trek. Once Star Wars breaks your heart, that's when you start to open your heart to Warhammer 40K. You grow up from child to teenager, and let Warhammer 40K inhabit your mind. It's kind of edgy, cooler, just whatever you want space shit, but it has had the room to just expand in all these different directions that it's very easy for you to find, I think, something that you like in all of this. It definitely took me a while. I was very dismissive of 40K for a while, but I've come around.
The dejected Star Wars fan angle is one that I hadn't thought of, but that is wildly true. Holy shit.
Yeah. It's certainly true for me, where it's just like, after I certainly paid 40K no mind until the wake of Last Jedi, where it was like, oh, the fans hate this. Maybe I'm not a fan of this anymore. Let's play Mechanicus. But yeah, one thing I'd like to mention before we end here is I don't think I fully expressed my love of this soundtrack as it connects to the game. All of these tracks are very short, but they take you on a journey. And we've talked around this a little bit, but I think that goes so well when you're actually going through the moment to moment gameplay story in the game, where like even if you don't have a connection to any of the lore or anything else, you have the ability to connect with this music and the rhythm of battle. And even if whether you're winning or losing, the song that's playing will kind of move with you in the rhythm of the game. And there's so many times in the game where I am so aware of the music, but I don't feel distracted. I feel like fueled by it, and that
sort of
seems to
locks you in.
connect really well with like what music is in the 40K universe, which is something to make you part of the Hive. And so I just want to give a huge shout out to Jesper Kid for this one, just because it all sounds of a type. All of these sound like 40 Darktide tracks, but each one is kind of like a little bit unique, has its own signature ideas, and it connects back to it. And there's a lot of it, and none of it is like, oh, this is the kind of bad one. It's like there's bangers, and the rest of it's still good.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, the soundtrack really it does make you feel the setting through the music. The various industrial elements, the more expressive choruses, like it whether that journey that you're taking is a long walk through a grand cathedral, or a very tense, slow stroll through a hallway with various doors that could open at any time. The soundtrack like really brings that to the player. It makes you feel that that vibe of the world. It's beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I suppose with that, I think we can finish up. I think that's a nice way to end it. Ash, have you anything you want to plug? Just tell people where they can find you online or so forth.
You can find me on Blue Sky at tieria.bluesky, Tieria. And I got nothing in the works. My job is not on the internet.
Fair enough.
Thank you so much for coming on and chatting with us. I really appreciate your time, and it's so much fun just being able to dig deep into the lore and having the real. You have a doctorate in Gundam, but you're still pretty close to that in Warhammer, I found. So it's it's wonderful. I've been really looking forward to this.
You to come on and do a Gundam episode with us at some point. But I need to figure out the logistics of how that's going to work.
Yeah, well, anime month is coming.
Yeah, it's on the way.
There are a few pretty fun Gundam games that we could look into.
Yeah, one of my other friends who's really into Gundam is always going on about that arena battler that's out at the moment. Apparently, that's quite good.
Yeah.
And there's some good like Super Nintendo games, and the SD Gundam games and stuff have some pretty good music. But yeah,
G-Cooks is I think one of its unsung aspects is the soundtrack. Like, and I don't think it was featured nearly as wonderfully as it could have been. So I think that is rife also for
I'll have to check that out. If you want to go ahead, Reese, and tell people what you got going on at the moment yourself.
Check out Video Games Are the Worst Thing on Earth, the podcast where me and two others are mentally ill. Also check out this podcast, CRT Sound System. And yeah, I also have Existential Warfare, which is sort of like a little more spottier interview podcast. And that's going to be another episode one day, I bet, probably.
Excellent.
All right.
Yeah. As for ourselves, we can be found patreon.com CRT Sound System. There's a link tree in the show notes for all of our socials. We're mostly just on Blue Sky. That's about it, really. There's a link to the Discord. Come hang out in the Discord if you want to chat to us about video game music, normal music, whatever else you want to come and chat about. Come on the show. I haven't always looking for new and interesting episodes to do. So like if you've got a soundtrack you really love and you're listening to this going, why do they never talk about this soundtrack I like, let me know. Send us a DM. Come on the show. We're always happy to have people on to just chat about shit that they like.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
come on the show.
Absolutely, is right. So I guess we'll finish up with the last track here, which is The Emperor of Mankind. So I guess appropriately enough to finish this episode. Thank you, Ash, for joining us again, and thank you, Reese, as always, and thank you for listening. Good
Thank
night.
you,
Yeah, thank you
Ash.
for having me. And free Palestine.
Free Palestine, absolutely.
Indeed.